Hi, I'm John Arnold with 7 Minute Life, and this video I'm putting together for anybody out there who has been wanting to change their life and you've been stuck for whatever reason. And I really have two different people in mind there's two different kinds of stuck you can be. And sometimes these overlap. I've been both of these people. I'm going to go into those in just a moment. And what I want to do today is lift up to you a solution, because what I found out is that regardless of why you're stuck, oftentimes the solution boils down to one simple thing that you have to begin with no matter what. And we're going to get into that today. So let's talk about the two different ways that you might be trying to change your life, or why you might be trying to change your life, but you're just not moving forward. And the first one is what I would call being stuck in the daily grind. And I drew these two gears up here because I think we can get in a place in our life sometimes where we feel like every day we wake up in the morning and we go into the day, and it's like we get thrown into all the things going on during the day, and they're pushing in on us, and they're crushing down on us a lot of times. And it's very life depleting, and we get up and we do mainly the same things every day. We kind of wish and long for it to be different. It feels chaotic. We feel overwhelmed. We feel a tremendous amount of pressure. And unfortunately what happens is we come out the other side, but oftentimes just keep cycling back in over and over again in this sort of trapped cycle of being in the daily grind. Now, something that's a little bit similar is we're living one place and we want to be someplace else, and there's a huge gap, and we're fearful about making the leap. We're fearful about completely changing, like maybe a job change or a move to a new community, but some very, very significant change we want to make in our life. In this one, we're just kind of lost in the malaise of the busyness of life. And in this one, we really long for a radically different life. We have a dream of something we want to be in, we want to be doing, and it's perpetually put on hold. We're always shoving it off to someday. And I would like that mythical someday to start to be today for you. I said I've been both of these people before, and I've gone through both of these. I've escaped both of these dynamics. And it took the same thing both times. So let me tell you a little bit about my story. This daily grind one, I think of two different times in my life. One in particular where I had really lost sight of my priorities. I was pastoring a church. For those of you who know me, I started with the 7 Minute Life in February of 2016. But before that, for 20 plus years, I was a pastor of local churches. I went through about 4 different churches during that time, and I pastored most of that, co-pastored it with my wife. And I was very, very busy human being. I have 2 children. I'm married and have my wife. So I had the commitment of being a parent to my 2 kids, to being a good spouse, and to be a pastor. And for those of you who think pastors only work on Sunday, well, no, we're on 24/7 all the time, and our phone can ring and it can mean something different every day. And we waffle between hats of everything from sitting at someone's bedside while they're dying to trying to levelize budgets in a church. So we wear so many hats. It's constantly demanding on us. And it's really easy to get lost in that. And I got myself lost in that. This was, now it's been close to 10 years ago. I had lost myself so much in that I remember standing in my den one day and thinking, my kids don't know the real me, because I'm a happy person. I'm a fun person. I'm a good person. And I was not a happy person. I was not a fun person. I had allowed that daily grind to wear me down to a place where I was depressed. I was angry. I walked around just thin all the time in terms of my emotions. And so my poor kids, God love them, they were little at that time. And, they tended to get an ounce of a pound of retribution for an ounce of infraction. I'd snap on them, and those of you who are parents, you know what I'm talking about, where your child does something simple that's wrong, and you're over the top angry at them unnecessarily. And I knew I was in a bad place when that was becoming the way I behaved and the way I acted, and I didn't want to be there. And it was just so life depleting. It's to the point that I became depressed, and I honestly got scared by how depressed I was. I had a wake-up moment where I went in one day and I was going to get ready for work, and I had laid out, or I went in there to get ready, and my kids used our bathroom as well. Don't understand that. We had 2 bathrooms. They had their own bathroom. They loved to use our bathroom as well, and they were a little bitty, and I think they just liked being near us. But I went in there, and I went to brush my teeth, and there were 4 toothbrushes, and I couldn't tell which one was mine. I was so depressed that my cognitive ability was impaired, and that was scary. It scared, in fact, what I did, it scared me. I took my toothbrushes, I lined them up, and I took mine, and I faced it with the head toward the edge of the counter, a way that nobody'd ever lay down a toothbrush, and I let everybody else get ready. And then I came back in and found mine that was still laying there, and I actually put it in a drawer because I was afraid the next day I wouldn't be able to know which one was mine. And I knew at that point I really needed help, and I did. I made some significant lifestyle adjustments, and I'll come back to, though, how I could have dodged that completely, and that didn't have to be my story in just a moment. Well, now actually, let's just go ahead and go there, because I can come to this leap in a moment. At that time, what I did was I got a counselor, and I worked really hard on what I called my core 4. I worked on making a priority my health, by being physically active, by working on sleep, because that was falling by the wayside for me all the time. I made sure that I wasn't isolating and that I was connected with people, because that when you get depressed, you want to shut down and hide away. And I also made sure I was eating decently, because when you don't feel well, you just don't eat well, or at least I don't. And I started eating fast food way too much, or I could go all day long and realize I'd skipped lunch and maybe breakfast, and mid-afternoon I've got a headache and I don't know why. Well, I haven't eaten or taken anything in. Shocking that I would feel bad. So I worked on those core 4, and I got a counselor to help me out, and I came back up out of that pit. I really believe I could have avoided that entirely, that I didn't need to go there. And the key was I never would have wound up there if I had been 100% clear on what my priorities were. It's really that simple. If I had and that's what I had to do to get out of it. I had to get clear on what my highest priorities were. I had to know that my health and my relationships had to come first before anything and everything else, and I had to be willing to pay whatever price necessary to get back to a place to protect those things, to move out of that. And your story it may not be that extreme, but even if you're just in a place where you feel overwhelmed and it feels chaotic, I can all but guarantee you what's happening is you've lost sight of your priorities, and you're getting sucked into so many other people's expectations and agendas that they are chewing the life out of you. You're just getting ground up in here by these other people pushing on you. And it doesn't mean when you make your priorities a priority, it doesn't mean that you're becoming selfish and ignoring those things, because one of your priorities may be something like attending to your family, or one of your highest priorities may be serving. It might be serving at volunteering at a shelter somewhere, but you're not doing those things that are life-giving to you, and you get worn down and you grind down. So you've got to be clear on your priorities if you want to escape this daily grind. Now, I said there's another similar phenomenon. You can be living one place when you dream of being someplace else. As I said, I was in ministry for almost 25 years now. It would be 25 years coming up, I believe, next year. And I loved it. I loved my churches. I loved the people that were in them. I loved a lot of the ministry that I was involved in. I had phenomenal experiences over those 20 years. But if I'm honest with myself, for most of that time, I felt a bit like a square peg in a round hole. I was effective at what I did and I enjoyed it, but there was something that was askew and awry where it wasn't like the perfect fit, for lack of a better word. And I think I was wired that way from the beginning. Even before I went into ministry, I went in and I sat down with my pastor and I said, you know what? If I go forward and I get this I can't believe the name just went out of my head. My Master's of Divinity, the degree I had to get. If I get this Master's of Divinity and I get ordained, what can I do other than traditional pulpit ministry? I was asking that even before I went in. But I felt called toward using my life, fully toward the ministry of the church, and that was the only thing that I could see as a job to live that out, if you will. And so that's what I entered into. And I honestly think that I was called into each one of those positions and I was right where I needed to be because I was being prepared for where I needed to be later, and I was learning and growing in that. But I always felt like a square peg in a round hole. And my kids will tell you that when they were small, I mean, they're now both in college. They're 19 and 22 at the time that I'm taping this. And they'll tell you, I used to be driving them to school. I'd say, guys, if I wasn't a pastor, what do you think I should be? And they heard that thing so many times. And that was my heart wondering where I needed to be because I didn't feel I was over here in traditional pulpit ministry, but I longed for something over here and I wasn't real clear what that was. But I had a lot of clues from my life. I knew when I was younger that I really wanted to help people succeed, and I had this driving urge in myself towards self-improvement all the time and wanting to live life to its fullest. Wanting to live epically is the word that I use. That when I do stuff, I do it on an epic scale. I do things big. And that was a longing I had. And that's kind of entrepreneurial. And I won't go into all the throes of that, but there were fingerprints along the way that really I was called to probably write and be more entrepreneurial in my lifestyle than I was in this traditional pulpit ministry. And that was becoming more and more apparent to me. And I started to realize that I wanted to make a leap at some point and try to not just live in wondering what would happen. I wanted to be able to look back at some point and say, I did it. I tried. I didn't ever want to come to the end of my days and have a what if I had only tried this or only done that. And so about, oh my goodness, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, I started realizing that I really loved doing marketing online. I loved writing online. I was doing a lot of that stuff in my church. And that's what I loved. Like every waking moment I had that wasn't toward ministry, I was listening to podcasts about marketing. I was learning how to blog. I was learning how to shoot video. I was building this skill set constantly outside of ministry, and I would apply it here, but it was always tugging at me to do something different with it. And I started working with Allyson some, and she more and more wanted me to have a larger role in the 7-Minute Life. And this is something I have told very, very few people, but I'll share it in this video. Almost 2 years before, well, over 2 years before I made the leap, I came in one day and I'd had a meeting with someone, and I'd been talking about the fact that, you know what, when I'm 50, and at that time I just turned 49, said by the time I'm 50, I need to do this, whatever this is going to be. So I had about a 2-year window. And what I envisioned at that time was I will be working for the 7-Minute Life to help people live their lives more fully, and I will be helping people be closer to God and living their lives more fully through my blog, The Practical Disciple. Those were the two things I said, That's what I want to try to do. That's where I want to be. And it was over 2 years ago. And I went in that day, and I had been thinking about this for a long time. And I sat down at my desk, and I wrote a resignation letter dated for my 50th birthday, which was almost 2 years away. And I said in that letter, I talked about how wonderful it had been to be a part of the ministry here at this church that I was in. And I shared how I now felt called to use my gifts to help people grow in their lives through the 7-Minute Life and the Practical Disciple. And I took that letter, that resignation letter, and I put it in a file. And it was sitting there. But I had made that decision almost 2 years before it actually happened. Time pressed on, and I worked on my gifts. I worked on those things. I worked with Allyson. I did more and more work with her. I started working part-time with her about a year before that. Well, about a year before that date came up, my birthday, June 20th. And my birthday came, and I wasn't there yet. But I had told myself, I'll allow myself the grace of my 50th year, but sometime within my 50th year, John Arnold, you're going to take that leap, and you're going to live without regret or question of whether you could have or should have ever tried your dream. And it ended up February. My birthday was in June. It ended up February 18th of 2016. I came in, and it was really hard. But I told the folks that I knew and loved at the church I was serving, First Texarkana, I love you guys for supporting me and making this leap. I said I really feel called on to try this, to do this. My heart is in it, and I think that's where I need to go. And I stepped out over this void, and I didn't jump here, like, in fact, as I film this, I'm probably somewhere, truth be told, somewhere hanging over the gap. Like, I am now working for the 7-Minute Life, and I'm working on the Practical Disciple, my blog, and developing it into my own ministry. And I do preach in a church now, so I kind of, I kind of have my cake and get to eat it too, and have the icing as well, because I preach every Sunday with a beautiful little group of folks in Bossier City at a church called Trinity Presbyterian. 25, 30 of us, but I love going in every week and being able to preach, which is heart passion for me, and yet simultaneously I'm living this dream. And I said, that the solution to both of these is very similar. You have to commit to what your priorities are. I had to say, what is my purpose? What are my gifts? How can I best live those out and make that my highest priority? And then every day step into it. And that's not been easy. If you listened closely to my story, I started building the skill set to make this leap years before I did it. And before I ever knew Allyson had any interest in, working with me. I volunteered and I did some things with her. I helped her on the 7-Minute Solution, and we were, blog buddies, if you will, where she'd have a question about how to do something on a blog, and I would help her out, or she'd have an editing need and I would help her out. But I had no clue if she'd ever want to hire me full time. It was years before that. And, but I knew in my heart that even if that wasn't it, I just loved learning about this marketing stuff and being online. And I feel like my whole life has come in full circle. I mean, I started out a computer science major and went into ministry, and have always been interested in self-improvement and development. And now it's like all those things are coming together. But I had to know my priorities, and I had to be willing to take that leap. And whenever you make this leap, there's a cost when you make those kind of changes. But this is what I want to say to you. If you're afraid, if you're sitting over here and you're putting that off, there's two things I want you to realize. Whatever the cost looks like, and it looks like a sacrifice to you, what you're really doing is you're making an investment. You're making an investment in being happy. You're making an investment of having no regrets. And that's the second thing I would just underscore, and that is this. You do not want to get to the end of your life and say, what if I had only? What if I had only? you know what? I don't know. A year from now, I may find myself back in ministry. I may go, John Arnold, what were you thinking? But right now, I am loving living into the possibility and the freedom of what is hopefully the fullest potential of who and what I can be right now. And every day, I'm doing what I can to make it better, committing a little bit more into learning, committing a little bit more into skills. And so I guess I'm kind of telling you right now, if you're stuck, get clear on your priorities. How would you like life to be different? I mean, if you could wave a magic wand and a week from now, 90 days from now, what would your life look like? And paint that picture and act on it now as if it were real. Like me, writing that letter of resignation. I wrote it 2 years before it happened, or even knew if I could have that job. I have to tell you, my neighbors probably thought I was nuts. I don't know if people saw me do this, but even before that, probably a year before that, I would walk around when I did my morning walk and I'm listening to podcasts and I'm learning this stuff, and I would say out loud to myself sometimes, I'd say, I am a blogger and I make my living now full-time blogging. I made that change in 6 months and I provide for the needs of my family and then some. And I said that to myself, I don't know how many times. And it wasn't real yet, but I had to begin to think and believe and own that picture in my head for it to translate into a reality of living over here. And I did that day in and day out. So you've got to paint this vivid picture in your mind of what you want and where you want to be. So I'm going to kind of leave it there. I would love to hear from you. Which one of these do you feel like you're in? And if there's some way you could change it, I would love to know. What would you change? It can be really small. It doesn't have to be a giant leap. This leap starts with a step, just taking a run. It's like, oh, I'm going to go now. It's just making that decision. And I think that's what Allyson means by, change happens in an instant. It happens the instant we decide to change. Is today going to be the day where you say, enough of this. Forget it. I'm tired of being chewed up and spit out. I want to live differently. Or is it going to be here? I'm tired of being over here feeling like a square peg in a round hole. I'm going to pull out of that round hole and I'm going to look for a square one, and I'm going to paint a picture in my mind of what that square one is, and I will fake it till I make it if I have to, but by golly, I'm not going to live with regret. Let me know. I want your comments, and I look forward to seeing you in a video soon. Bye now.